about best practices for preventing employee time theft. My name is Susan Warren, and I will be your presenter today. And Dina Russell is also with me while we talk to you about, what you may have just witnessed. Employee time theft and best practices for preventing it. Here's our agenda for the day. What do you, the employer, have to lose when it comes to employee time theft? How do employees get away with time theft? What are the different types of time theft, including time clock abusers, traveling employees, remote workers, and telecommuters? We'll discuss why your company should have a written policy regarding time and attendance, and how that should be communicated to your employees, and how it should be enforced. We're going to talk about doing all of this in a positive manner rather than in a punishing way. And finally, we'll talk about how you can use technology to help with preventing employee time theft. We all know what absenteeism is. We all know that you can be fired for excessive absenteeism. Well, today there's a new trend, and our word for today is presenteeism. That's the act of being present at work, but not working. We've all seen them. You heard me doing my imitation of one as I began the webinar, checking my Facebook, making personal calls, gossiping. And you should be able to dismiss employees for excessive presenteeism because they are stealing your company time. Well, what does that really mean, stealing your company time? No one really worried too much about time theft until Robert Half began to do studies in the mid-'80s and brought it to the attention of executives that a large portion of the workforce was not being productive the whole time they were being paid. And you can see my statistic here that says between $50 and $400 billion in productivity are lost each year due to time theft issues. The average employee ends up stealing or getting paid for about an hour each day that they aren't truly productive. And that equates to over 4 hours a week or almost 6 weeks a year. So you can see that when you look at the bottom line, the numbers quickly become staggering. And here's a chart for those of you who like graphics. Across the top of the chart is the number of employees that your company might have. And down the left, we have hourly rates. And we're going to skip. We're not even going to look at these two top lines because these rates are below the minimum wage. But the next cost is the next column is the cost per minute. And that's the hourly rate in this column divided by 60 minutes in an hour. So this is the cost per minute. So if every employee in the company clocked in 5 minutes late in the morning, clocked out 5 minutes early at lunch, and clocked back in 5 minutes late after lunch, then clocked out 5 minutes early in the evening, they would be stealing 20 minutes a day from you. 5 minutes, 4 times a day. And this chart shows the profit loss based on cost per minute for the number of employees that you would suffer in a year with 250 workdays. And I did the math to show you. So if you take this last line for 100 people, 20 minutes a day times 25 cents times 250 days times 100 employees is $125,000. How can this happen? When I looked at these numbers, I was astonished. But what research indicates is that most companies have weak internal controls. They either have no policies regarding time and attendance, or those policies are just not enforced. Employees are trained regarding time and attendance or clocks, how to use the clocks during new hire orientation, and then it's never mentioned again. Employees see other employees abusing the system, and they follow along. Then wasting time comes to be the norm. It's expected and treated almost like it's a benefit. Companies are not diligent in their hiring practices. They don't ask references. Does this employee respect company time? Or supervisors don't enforce good time management. Okay, raise your hands. How many of you have your cell phones on your desk right now? Well, okay, I'll give you that one. Today, we do actually use our cell phones to make business calls and texts, but using them to check social media or shop online or check personal email, no, that qualifies as time theft when you are being paid to work. I read one article about an employee who was even operating a business on the side from his desk while he was supposed to be working. And you are letting them get away with stealing your time. But before I get too passionate, I will stop for a reality check. It is not practical to think that employees won't call to schedule a doctor's appointment while they're on the clock. They will have to run to the bank and the post office occasionally. And if you didn't allow that, you would soon find yourself with no employees and be thought of as a tyrant. However, best practices does call for a need to set limits and expect your employees to respect the limits that you have set. So let's look at the types of time thieves, beginning with time clock abusers. You'll probably all recognize these. We already talked about the example with that chart a few slides back, but here's some other variations. Employees clock in near a door, but then they walk a great distance to their workstation. Or employees pull up to the building, jump out of their car to clock in, then leave the building, get back in their car, and go park their car, and then walk from the parking lot to their workstation while they're already clocked in. Time clock abusers will also say, oh, I lost my badge, but I got here early and I stayed late. Or the time clock wasn't working, it wouldn't read my badge. Or so-and-so forgot his badge, so I let him use mine. And that's the point where you just put your head in your hands and shake your head and say, what? As you're standing there trying to process a payroll and you've got all these punches that don't belong to the employees and can't figure out what happened, and then you find out what this time clock abuser has done. I suppose that would be qualifying as a form of buddy punching, where one employee gives his or her badge to another employee to swipe. Another form of time clock abuse is paper timesheets, where time is not written down correctly. Extended breaks end up being very costly. One study estimates that a smoker can cost an employer up to $6,000 more than a non-smoker because of the number and length of breaks. And then there's always sleeping on the job. I read one statistic that said something like 75% of workers admit to having fallen asleep at work. So what should your best practice be when dealing with time clock abusers? First and foremost, a good example regarding respect for company time needs to be set by all management from the top down. If employees see executives, managers, and supervisors who respect company time, they are much more likely to do so themselves. If you don't already have a written policy regarding the use of time clocks or timekeeping, publish one. If you have a zero tolerance policy for certain infractions, let that be known in no uncertain terms. If you can afford them, the best way to prevent buddy punching is to use biometric time clocks. Employees can share badges, but they can't share hands or fingers. Of course, you train your new hires regarding how to clock in and out and meal in and out and what to do at breaks, but don't stop there. Reinforce that with refresher training as often as you see fit, at least once a year. Set up an anonymous time theft hotline if you think this is going to be beneficial, although be careful that you get concrete proof before you dole out any punishments in case you get tips that are just vindictive. And back to our first point on this slide, your managers are where respect for time begins, and they're also where it ends up. Managers need to manage their employees. When I train new users on the time and attendance system, I'm often met with the complaint that it just takes too long for managers to fix time card errors. And here's my reply to that. If the system, and by that I mean schedules and grace periods and rounding rules, are set up correctly, and if the employees are clocking in and out correctly, then there should be a very small number of errors for a manager to deal with. So if your system settings are correct, then managers should be able to have plenty of time to do their jobs and not be excessively burdened by timekeeping duties. But one of the duties of a manager is to coach or counsel employees who fail to follow the established company policies, including respect for company time. For those folks who don't cause any problems and who are following the policies as they should, encourage those good habits. If you have alerts, send an alert to managers of employees who have reached certain milestones without any absences, so those employees can be rewarded or at least publicly praised. Schedule those refresher training sessions to remind employees that you encourage respect for company time. See if employees have any suggestions for improvement. On this slide, I've got an example of just relocating a time clock, which could ultimately save your company money. Traveling employees are a little more difficult to track than the ones who are working on site and punching your time clock. You can watch for complaints from clients. You can check up on their assignments and make sure that their tasks are actually getting completed. Maybe have them send in progress reports or ask the clients to do the same. And again, make sure these traveling employees know that your company culture respects company time. So let's say you have a worst case scenario and you have to dismiss one of these traveling employees because you believe they were abusing their freedom and not doing their job. Make sure you've kept time records that you could use in a court of law to back up your claims. And you can help your employees keep good records so that it never comes to that by providing them with travel logs that you design so that you are sure you get the information you want. There are also GPS apps available that can help you track the physical locations of these traveling employees, or have them use their smartphone cameras to send you pictures from their locations. You don't have to act like you're spying on them. Tell them you want pictures from the locations where they're working so that you can put them in the company newsletter. And you don't have to put all of those pictures in the newsletter, but you'll have records of where the employees are when they're there. And just like the on-site employees, train, reprimand, and reward these traveling employees for their timekeeping habits. Remote workers. Everyone wants to work from home, the new American dream. But is it the new employer's nightmare? How can you possibly be sure that these employees are really working? More than any other type of employee, you must listen to the clients they work with. Make sure their projects are being completed correctly and on time. Keep communication frequent, if not almost constant. You can use instant messenger applications to make sure that they are where they're supposed to be. And again, let them know that your company culture embraces respect for company time. Your company policy on time and attendance should be published and distributed to all employees who will submit hours by any method at all. It can be hourly employees or salary employees if you're keeping track of their hours. Your policy should be very specific regarding zero tolerance items and what you consider to be time theft. Let your employees know how you monitor workers. Do you have cameras at the time clocks, or at the doors, or in the parking lot, or on the smoking deck? Let your employees know about reprimands and any point system you may have, and definitely let them know about rewards. The policy will be better received if it can be delivered in a positive light and projected as the right thing to do. Ask new hires to sign an agreement that they understand your policy and that they will follow the rules. That emphasizes early on that you are serious about your time and attendance policy. And as time goes on, keep reminding employees that you remember they need to be mindful of how they treat company time. Do they remember? Mention it at company meetings. Put up signs or posters. You can even put it on your email signature line or print it on check messages occasionally that go on their check stubs. Periodically review your policy and ask employees if they have any suggestions for changing the timekeeping policies. And be mindful of new time thieves. A decade ago, would you have ever imagined that Facebook could affect your bottom line? Once you've gone to all the trouble to create a timekeeping policy, you need to enforce it. And that policy should make it easier, not more difficult, for your managers to manage their teams. Some points of a timekeeping policy are very basic, but are worth bringing up, like do not tolerate favoritism. Use your reprimands and rewards for negative and positive reinforcement. Best practices might, for your organization, mean implementing a point system. Or maybe it's going to be helpful for your situation to use break bells or buzzers to let your employees know for sure when breaks begin and end. The ultimate reprimand or punishment is termination, and everyone understands that. But best practice calls for you to be very specific about what offenses would lead to termination, because both employees and managers need a clear set of rules to follow when it comes to what constitutes time theft. You cannot be vague in your best practices about these types of rules. Now, when I look back over a lot of what we've just talked about, it sounds really harsh and negative, and that's not really the ultimate goal. It seems to me that a company truly interested in the title of this webinar, Best Practices for Preventing Time Theft, would want to go about all of this in the most positive light possible. If installing cameras and threatening punishment is what you really need to do to save your bottom line, then that's what you have to do. But if you can successfully implement an honor system by appealing to your employees' integrity and loyalty, you might also engender goodwill. Loyal, happy employees tend to be very proud of their good attendance records. Spotlight them. Write them up in your newsletter. Give them awards like a good parking spot for a month or an extra Friday afternoon off or a $5 insert coffee shop name here gift card. If you are still using paper to track your employees' time, you might want to reevaluate that and look at an automated system if you want to cut out employee time theft. Technology works wonders when you're trying to reduce employee time theft. If you are still using swipe badges, look at biometrics to stop buddy punching. We mentioned earlier employees can trade badges, but they can't trade fingers or hands. If you have mobile workers who are not on site to clock in and out, you could look at iMessaging that allows those employees to clock in and out via the telephone. But no matter how you capture your employees' time, do use the technology that's available to you. Use the reports that are in your time system that are already there offered to you to help you analyze where there may be problems with time theft. Reports can reveal what areas are working smoothly for you and what areas might need some help addressing employee time theft issues so that your company can improve performance and productivity and help you to reduce any time theft that may be happening or prevent time theft that might be looking for a window of opportunity. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you've learned some tips about best practices for preventing employee time theft. Please be on the lookout for more of our educational webinars soon, and have an Optimum day.